In the later years of the Second World War, radio communication became as decisive as armor or artillery. Every movement of troops, every request for fire support, and every logistical coordination depended on signals traveling through the air. This documentary examines the Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher mobile signal intercept truck, a specialized German electronic intelligence vehicle designed to operate close to the front lines. Its purpose was to intercept, analyze, and locate enemy radio transmissions in real time. Across 5 sections, this documentary will examine its development context, vehicle design, signal interception equipment, operational employment, and its overall role within German wartime signals intelligence doctrine. Origins and development of the Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher concept. Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher program overview. The Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher emerged from the German Army's growing reliance on battlefield radio intelligence after 1941. As the Eastern Front expanded and Allied forces improved tactical radio coordination, the Wehrmacht required mobile platforms capable of monitoring enemy communications close to combat zones. The Funkspäher concept, meaning radio scout, was developed to fill this gap by combining mobility, interception equipment, and trained signals personnel into a single vehicle. The Sd.Kfz designation placed the vehicle within Germany's standardized system for special-purpose military vehicles. While never produced in large numbers, the Sd.Kfz 312 represented a focused attempt to push electronic intelligence forward with advancing units rather than relying solely on rear-area listening stations. Operational requirement for frontline signal interception. By mid-war, static listening posts were no longer sufficient. Fast-moving operations demanded signal intelligence units that could keep pace with armored and motorized formations. Enemy units increasingly used short-range tactical radios that could only be intercepted within limited distances. The Sd.Kfz 312 was conceived to operate just behind or alongside combat elements, allowing German signals units to detect enemy transmissions almost immediately after they were made. This requirement shaped every aspect of the vehicle's design. It needed sufficient speed to redeploy rapidly, enough internal space for operators and equipment, and electrical capacity to support multiple radio systems simultaneously. Protection was secondary, as the vehicle relied on mobility and concealment rather than armor. Chassis selection and vehicle architecture. The Sd.Kfz 312 was based on a medium truck or half-track chassis adapted for signals work. German military planners favored proven automotive platforms to reduce maintenance complexity and speed production. The chassis provided a balance between road mobility and off-road capability, allowing the vehicle to operate on unimproved roads near the front. The vehicle body was modified to house radio racks, operator consoles, power distribution systems, and antenna mounts. Windows were limited or shielded to reduce light and signal leakage. Internally, space was carefully organized to allow operators to work for extended periods under combat conditions. Power generation and electrical infrastructure. Signal interception equipment placed heavy demands on electrical power. The Sd.Kfz 312 incorporated upgraded generators and battery systems beyond those found in standard transport vehicles. These systems ensured stable voltage for sensitive receivers and direction-finding equipment, even when the engine was idling or shut down. Auxiliary power systems allowed the vehicle to operate quietly when stationary, reducing the risk of detection. Electrical grounding and shielding were carefully implemented to prevent interference from the vehicle's own engine and electronics, a critical requirement for accurate signal interception. Role within German signals intelligence units. The Sd.Kfz 312 was assigned to specialized signals intelligence detachments within the Wehrmacht. These units operated independently or in support of larger formations, reporting intercepted information to divisional or corps-level command. The vehicle's role was not to decode high-level encrypted traffic, but to identify unit-level transmissions, call signs, frequencies, and transmission patterns. This information provided commanders with insights into enemy unit locations, strength, and intentions. Even when messages could not be decoded, transmission volume and movement offered valuable tactical intelligence. Early deployment and experimental use. Evidence suggests that the Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher saw limited deployment, primarily as an experimental or small series vehicle. Its use was most likely concentrated in sectors where radio traffic was dense and fluid, such as the Eastern Front and later defensive operations in Western Europe. Feedback from these deployments influenced later German signal intelligence vehicle designs, even as wartime conditions limited further development. The Sd.Kfz 312 thus represents a transitional step between early static listening stations and more integrated mobile electronic warfare platforms. Transition to vehicle-specific systems and equipment. With the development context established, attention now turns to the physical systems that allowed the Sd.Kfz 312 to perform its mission. The next section will examine the vehicle's structural layout, crew configuration, and protective features, detailing how form followed function in this specialized wartime machine. Vehicle design, crew layout, and mobility characteristics. Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher vehicle structure and external configuration. The Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher was designed around the principle that electronic intelligence required stability, space, and mobility rather than armor or firepower. Externally, the vehicle presented the appearance of a modified military truck or light half-track, with a box-shaped rear compartment housing its specialized equipment. This enclosed body differentiated it immediately from standard transport vehicles and reflected its non-combat but highly technical role. The exterior was deliberately understated. Camouflage paint schemes matched those of other Wehrmacht support vehicles, reducing visual distinction. The vehicle carried no prominent markings beyond standard unit identifiers, as concealment was essential to its survivability. Antenna mounts were the most distinctive external features, rising above the roofline or extending from retractable supports along the body. Chassis and suspension system. The Sd.Kfz 312 relied on a proven German military chassis, selected to balance reliability with sufficient load-bearing capacity. The suspension system was designed to handle the added weight of radio racks, generators, and power storage equipment without compromising mobility. Leaf springs or torsion elements absorb vibration, an important consideration for sensitive radio components. While not intended for direct off-road assault, the vehicle was capable of operating on dirt roads, forest tracks, and damaged infrastructure. This allowed signal interception teams to position themselves close enough to the front to capture short-range transmissions while remaining outside immediate combat zones. Mobility and speed characteristics. Mobility was a critical operational requirement. The Sd.Kfz 312 needed to relocate quickly as front lines shifted or as enemy radio patterns changed. On roads, the vehicle maintained speeds comparable to other logistical and command vehicles, enabling it to accompany motorized formations during advances or withdrawals. Off-road performance was adequate rather than exceptional. The vehicle avoided heavily contested terrain, relying instead on route planning and coordination with combat units for protection. Its operational doctrine emphasized movement between pre-selected listening positions rather than continuous motion under fire. Crew complement and roles. The Sd.Kfz 312 typically carried a small but highly trained crew, usually consisting of a driver, a vehicle commander, and 2 to 3 signals intelligence operators. Each crew member had a defined role, reflecting the technical complexity of the mission. The driver was responsible not only for vehicle operation but also for managing engine noise and positioning to minimize signal interference. The vehicle commander coordinated interception tasks, maintained communication with higher headquarters, and ensured security. The radio operators monitored frequencies, logged transmissions, and operated direction-finding equipment. Interior layout and workstations. Inside the enclosed rear compartment, the vehicle was organized around efficiency and precision. Radio racks lined the walls, each holding receivers, amplifiers, and frequency control units. Operator stations were positioned to allow simultaneous monitoring of multiple channels, with headsets used to isolate specific signals. Work surfaces were limited but carefully arranged to accommodate logbooks, maps, and signal analysis tools. Lighting was subdued and adjustable, allowing night operations without compromising concealment. Ventilation systems managed heat generated by electronic equipment, particularly during extended monitoring sessions. Power distribution and noise management. The internal power distribution system was a defining feature of the Sd.Kfz 312. Electrical lines were shielded to prevent interference, and circuits were isolated to ensure that fluctuations from one system did not disrupt others. Batteries allowed short periods of silent operation, during which the engine could be shut down entirely. Noise discipline was strictly enforced. Excessive engine noise or generator operation could attract enemy attention or interfere with signal clarity. Crews were trained to balance power demands with acoustic concealment, particularly during operations near contested areas. Protection and defensive limitations. The Sd.Kfz 312 was lightly protected at best. Armor, if present, was minimal and intended only to stop small fragments or small arms fire. The vehicle was not designed to withstand direct engagement and carried limited defensive weapons, if any. Its primary defense was positioning. Funkspäher crews relied on distance, camouflage, and coordination with nearby units for security. If threatened, the vehicle's doctrine emphasized rapid withdrawal rather than resistance. Operational readiness and maintenance considerations. Maintaining the Sd.Kfz 312 required both mechanical and technical expertise. Radio equipment was sensitive to dust, moisture, and vibration, demanding frequent inspection and calibration. Crews performed routine maintenance as part of daily operations, often under field conditions. Mechanical reliability was equally important. A disabled Funkspäher vehicle represented not only a loss of intelligence capability but also a potential compromise of sensitive equipment. As a result, crews were trained to prioritize vehicle readiness alongside signal monitoring duties. Transition to specialized electronic equipment. With the vehicle's physical design and crew environment established, the focus now shifts to the systems that defined its mission. The next section will examine the radio interception, direction finding, and analysis equipment installed within the Sd.Kfz 312, explaining how German signals units turned intercepted radio waves into actionable battlefield intelligence. Radio interception, direction finding, and signal analysis systems. Fuji series radio interception receivers installed in Sd.Kfz 312. At the core of the Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher's mission were its radio interception receivers, drawn primarily from the Wehrmachtsfug, or Funkgerät, equipment family. These receivers were designed to monitor a wide range of frequencies used by enemy tactical radios, particularly those employed at battalion and regimental levels. Unlike standard communications sets, these receivers emphasized sensitivity and selectivity rather than transmission power. The receivers allowed operators to scan multiple bands rapidly, identifying active frequencies and isolating individual transmissions. Fine-tuning controls enabled precise adjustment, which was essential when operating in congested electromagnetic environments. While these systems could not break strong encryption, they were highly effective at capturing unencrypted traffic and identifying call signs and transmission habits. Role and purpose of interception equipment. The primary role of the interception equipment was early detection. By monitoring enemy radio traffic, Funkspäher crews could provide timely warnings of troop movements, artillery preparations, or command activity. Even brief transmissions could reveal unit presence and operational tempo. The Sd.Kfz 312 was not intended to replace fixed listening stations. Instead, it complemented them by operating closer to the source of transmissions. This proximity increased signal strength and clarity, making it possible to detect low-power radios that would otherwise go unnoticed. Direction-finding antenna systems. One of the defining features of the Sd.Kfz 312 was its radio direction-finding capability. The vehicle was equipped with specialized antenna systems designed to determine the bearing of enemy transmissions. These antennas could be frame-type, loop-based, or whip-supported, depending on the frequency range being monitored. By rotating or electronically switching between antenna elements, operators could identify the direction from which a signal originated. When combined with reports from other Funkspäher vehicles or stationary posts, these bearings allowed German signals intelligence units to triangulate enemy positions with increasing accuracy. Antenna deployment and concealment. Antenna placement was a constant balance between performance and concealment. Extended antennas improved reception but increased the risk of visual detection. The Sd.Kfz 312 incorporated retractable or foldable antenna mounts, allowing crews to adjust their configuration based on tactical conditions. In some cases, antennas were disguised as standard vehicle fittings or positioned near natural cover. Crews were trained to deploy antennas quickly upon halting and to stow them just as rapidly if relocation became necessary. Signal monitoring and logging procedures. Once a transmission was detected, operators followed strict procedures to log its characteristics. Frequency, time, signal strength, call signs, and transmission duration were recorded in detail. This information formed the basis for pattern analysis, revealing enemy routines and command structures. Operators worked in shifts to maintain continuous coverage during active periods. Headphones were used to isolate specific signals, reducing operator fatigue and improving accuracy. Discipline in logging was essential, as even small errors could distort the intelligence picture. Limitations in signal decoding and analysis. The Sd.Kfz 312's equipment was not designed for complex cryptographic work. Encrypted messages, particularly those using advanced allied systems, could rarely be decoded at the vehicle level. Instead, intercepted traffic was forwarded to rear-area intelligence centers for deeper analysis. Despite this limitation, the vehicle's contribution remained significant. The volume of traffic, frequency changes, and movement of signal sources often provided actionable intelligence without the need to understand message content. In many cases, knowing where and when a unit was transmitting was more valuable than the message itself. Integration with higher-level intelligence networks. Information gathered by the Sd.Kfz 312 was transmitted to higher headquarters via secure channels. This allowed commanders to integrate signal intelligence with reconnaissance reports, aerial observations, and prisoner interrogations. The mobile nature of the Funkspäher vehicle ensured that intelligence flowed continuously, even as front lines shifted. This adaptability was one of its greatest strengths, allowing German commanders to maintain situational awareness in fluid combat environments. Operational insight from field use. Field experience demonstrated that the effectiveness of the Sd.Kfz 312 depended heavily on crew skill. Experienced operators could detect subtle changes in enemy radio behavior and anticipate movements before they became visible on the battlefield. However, the system was also vulnerable. Poor antenna placement, electrical interference, or operator fatigue could degrade performance. These challenges underscored the complexity of electronic warfare and the need for specialized training and discipline. Transition to battlefield employment. With the technical systems explained, attention now turns to how the Sd.Kfz 312 was employed in real combat conditions. The next section will examine its operational deployment, tactical use near the front lines, and the types of missions it supported during the Second World War. Front-line deployment and operational employment. Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher Tactical Deployment Doctrine. The Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher was deployed according to a doctrine that emphasized proximity without exposure. Its mission required it to operate close enough to enemy forces to intercept low-power tactical radio transmissions, yet far enough to avoid direct engagement. Commanders selected listening positions based on terrain, anticipated enemy movement, and the density of radio traffic. These vehicles were rarely placed in isolation. They operated within a broader intelligence and communications network, often supported by security elements from nearby units. Their deployment was carefully coordinated to ensure that intelligence gathered could be rapidly transmitted to decision-makers. Selection of listening positions. Effective signal interception depended heavily on location. Elevated ground, forest edges, and areas with minimal electromagnetic interference were preferred. The Sd.Kfz 312 was often positioned behind natural cover, using terrain to mask its presence while allowing antennas clear reception paths. Positions were frequently temporary. Crews might operate from a location for only a few hours before relocating to avoid detection or to follow shifting enemy formations. This pattern of short-duration deployments reduced vulnerability and increased coverage. Operational use on the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front provided an environment where the Sd.Kfz 312's capabilities were particularly valuable. Vast distances, fluid front lines, and extensive radio use by Soviet forces created conditions favorable for mobile interception. Funkspäher vehicles monitored unit-level transmissions that revealed troop concentrations, movement axes, and changes in command activity. In this context, the Sd.Kfz 312 contributed to early warning of attacks and withdrawals. Even when transmissions could not be decoded, sudden increases in radio activity often preceded major operations. This allowed German commanders to adjust defenses or redeploy reserves. Employment in Western Europe. In Western Europe, especially after the Allied landings, radio interception became more challenging. Allied forces employed improved signal discipline and encryption, reducing the volume of exploitable traffic. Nevertheless, the Sd.Kfz 312 continued to provide value by detecting frequency usage patterns and identifying command nets. During defensive operations, Funkspäher vehicles were used to monitor Allied coordination during advances. Information on transmission direction and intensity helped identify main axes of attack and concentrations of command activity. Coordination with artillery and reconnaissance units. Intelligence from the Sd.Kfz 312 was often used in conjunction with artillery and reconnaissance reports. Direction-finding data could indicate the location of enemy headquarters or artillery observers, allowing German forces to target these positions indirectly. This coordination did not require full message decryption. The mere presence of sustained radio activity in a specific area could justify reconnaissance patrols or artillery registration, demonstrating the indirect but practical impact of signal intelligence. Challenges under combat conditions. Operating near the front exposed Funkspäher crews to constant risk. Artillery fire, air attacks, and advancing enemy units could threaten the vehicle at any time. The need to remain stationary for effective interception conflicted with the requirement for rapid movement under threat. Environmental factors also posed challenges. Weather conditions affected antenna performance, while dust and moisture threatened sensitive electronics. Crews adapted through careful equipment maintenance and frequent repositioning. Operational security and countermeasures. The Sd.Kfz 312 was itself vulnerable to enemy counterintelligence efforts. If detected, its presence could prompt changes in enemy radio procedures, reducing interception effectiveness. As a result, Funkspäher crews practiced strict radio silence regarding their own operations and minimized visible activity. Camouflage, disciplined movement, and coordination with friendly units were essential to maintaining operational security. The success of the vehicle often depended on remaining unnoticed rather than on technological superiority. Transition to strategic assessment. While the Sd.Kfz 312's battlefield role was limited in scale, its contribution to German operations reflected a broader shift toward electronic warfare. The final section will assess its overall impact, limitations, and place within the evolution of Second World War signal intelligence vehicles. Overall impact, limitations, and historical significance. Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher contribution to German electronic warfare. The Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher represented a focused effort by the German army to integrate electronic intelligence directly into frontline operations. Its primary contribution lay in its ability to shorten the time between enemy radio transmission and German command awareness. By operating close to the battlefield, it reduced reliance on distant listening stations and allowed intelligence to reflect real-time conditions. This capability supported tactical decision-making rather than strategic intelligence. The vehicle's value was measured in hours or even minutes gained, allowing commanders to react more effectively to enemy movements, artillery preparation, or changes in command activity. Limitations of technology and scale. Despite its conceptual strengths, the Sd.Kfz 312 faced significant limitations. Its interception equipment, while advanced for its time, struggled against improved Allied encryption and disciplined radio procedures. As the war progressed, the volume of exploitable traffic decreased, reducing the vehicle's effectiveness. Production numbers were limited, preventing widespread deployment. This scarcity meant that even when the vehicle proved useful, its overall impact on the war remained localized. Maintenance demands and the need for highly trained crews further constrained its operational availability. Vulnerability and survivability issues. The Sd.Kfz 312's lack of armor and defensive capability restricted its use in high-threat environments. Its survival depended on concealment, positioning, and timely withdrawal. In fast-moving or collapsing fronts, these conditions were difficult to maintain. The risk of capture also posed a serious concern. Loss of a Funkspäher vehicle could compromise sensitive equipment and operational methods. As a result, crews were often instructed to disable equipment if withdrawal was impossible, underscoring the vehicle's fragile position within combat zones. Influence on later signal intelligence vehicles. Although produced in limited numbers, the Sd.Kfz 312 influenced subsequent German and post-war approaches to mobile signal intelligence. The concept of integrating interception, direction finding, and analysis into a single mobile platform became increasingly important in later conflicts. Lessons learned from its deployment highlighted the need for better protection, greater automation, and improved power management. These insights informed the development of more advanced electronic warfare vehicles in the post-war period, particularly during the early Cold War. Operational insight and doctrinal value. The Sd.Kfz 312 demonstrated that signal intelligence did not require full message decryption to be valuable. Patterns of communication, frequency usage, and transmission movement could provide actionable information even under conditions of strong encryption. This understanding marked a shift in military intelligence thinking. Electronic emissions themselves became a source of intelligence, a principle that would later define modern electronic warfare doctrine. Historical significance within the Second World War. In historical terms, the Sd.Kfz 312 Funkspäher occupies a narrow but important niche. It did not alter the course of the war, nor did it achieve widespread recognition. Its significance lies in its role as a practical experiment in mobile electronic intelligence during a period of rapid technological change. The vehicle reflected the increasing complexity of warfare in the mid-20th century, where information and communication became as critical as firepower. As such, the Sd.Kfz 312 stands as an early example of the integration of electronic intelligence into tactical military operations, a development that would shape warfare long after the Second World War ended.